Welcome to Muse Fanfiction. Today we bring you an unforgettable story. What if Harry was the reincarnation of Merlin and pulled Excalibur from Gringotts at age 6? Loving our content? Smash that like button and join our family by subscribing. We truly appreciate each and every one of you. Now, let the story begin. Chapter 1, The Sword in the Vault. The street lamps of Privet Drive cast long shadows across the immaculate lawns as 6-year-old Harry Potter sat alone on the swing in the small neighborhood park. His too large clothes hung from his thin frame, and his wild black hair partially obscured the lightning bolt scar on his forehead. Most children would have been called home for dinner by now, but Harry knew the Dursleys wouldn't miss him. In fact, after the incident at school that morning, they'd be happier if he stayed away. Harry gazed at his palm, remembering how the classroom windows had shattered when Tommy Perkins had pushed him into the wall. He hadn't touched the glass. Hadn't even screamed. He'd just felt a surge of something warm and electric race through his body, and then, chaos. "It wasn't your fault, Harry." Harry jumped, nearly falling off the swing. Standing before him was a tall man with a long silver beard and half-moon spectacles. He wore what appeared to be a purple suit of an old-fashioned cut, and despite the strangeness of his appearance, Harry felt no fear, only a peculiar sense of recognition. "Who are you?" Harry asked, tilting his head. "And how do you know my name?" The old man smiled kindly. "My name is Albus Dumbledore. I've known you since you were a baby, though we haven't formally met until now." He gestured to the empty swing beside Harry. "May I?" Harry nodded, watching as the elderly man folded his tall frame onto the small swing with surprising grace. "I've been keeping an eye on you," Dumbledore continued, "and I've noticed some interesting things happening around you recently." Harry looked down at his shoes, scuffing them in the dirt. "If you mean the windows, I didn't break them on purpose. Aunt Petunia says I'm a freak, but I don't try to make strange things happen." "You're not a freak, Harry. You're a wizard, like your parents, and like me." Harry's head snapped up, eyes wide. "A wizard? But Uncle Vernon says there's no such thing as magic. And yet, windows break when you're upset. Bruises heal overnight. Your hair grows back after unfortunate haircuts." Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. "What would you call that, if not magic?" A strange feeling bubbled up in Harry's chest, not quite belief, but a recognition of truth that seemed to resonate with something deep inside him. "If I'm a wizard," Harry said slowly, "then why do I live with the Dursleys? Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Those are excellent questions, and ones that deserve full answers. But first," Dumbledore stood and extended his hand, "I'd like to show you something that I believe belongs to you." Harry hesitated. "Where?" "To a place called Gringotts, a bank for wizards. I've observed your magic growing stronger in recent months, far beyond what would be expected for a child your age. I believe there may be a reason for that, and an artifact that might provide some answers." Harry knew he shouldn't go anywhere with a stranger, but something about Dumbledore felt trustworthy, familiar even. And the promise of answers about his parents, about why he could do strange things. He took Dumbledore's hand. "All right." Dumbledore smiled. "Excellent. Now, this might feel a bit uncomfortable, but I promise it will be over quickly." Before Harry could ask what he meant, the world compressed around him. Colors swirled and twisted, and he felt like he was being squeezed through a very tight rubber tube. Just when he thought he couldn't bear it anymore, the sensation stopped, and Harry found himself standing in an alley beside a busy London street. What was that? He gasped, doubling over with his hands on his knees. "Apparition, magical transportation. My apologies for not warning you more thoroughly. Most find their first experience rather unpleasant." Harry straightened, fighting back nausea. "Where are we?" "Charing Cross Road. Our destination is just there." Dumbledore pointed to a shabby-looking pub nestled between a bookshop and a record store. A weathered sign hung above the door, "The Leaky Cauldron." Oddly, the people hurrying along the street didn't seem to notice the pub at all. Their eyes slid from the bookshop to the record store as if the leaky cauldron didn't exist. "They can't see it, can they?" Harry asked. "The normal people, I mean." Dumbledore looked impressed. "Very observant, Harry. No, muggles, non-magical folk, cannot see the leaky cauldron or many other magical places. They're hidden by enchantments." As they approached the pub, Harry noticed his reflection in the darkened windows. His scar seemed more pronounced than usual, almost glowing faintly in the glass. He reached up to touch it, and for a split second, another face superimposed over his own in the reflection, older, bearded, with eyes that held centuries of knowledge. Harry blinked, and the image was gone. "Something the matter, Harry?" Dumbledore asked, pausing at the door. "No," Harry said, though he wasn't entirely sure. "Just thought I saw something." The interior of the leaky cauldron was dark and somewhat shabby. A few patrons sat at scattered tables, drinking from oddly shaped glasses and mugs. They nodded respectfully to Dumbledore as he guided Harry through the room, but their eyes widened when they glimpsed the boy at his side. "Merlin's beard," whispered an old witch in the corner. "Is that?" "Not now, Doris," Dumbledore said pleasantly but firmly, steering Harry toward the back door. "Official Hogwarts business." They exited into a small, walled courtyard containing nothing but a trash bin and a few weeds. Dumbledore withdrew a slender wooden stick, a wand, Harry realized, and tapped a particular brick in the wall 3 times. The brick quivered and wriggled, then a small hole appeared in its center, growing wider and taller until it formed an archway large enough for even Dumbledore to walk through without stooping. Beyond lay a cobbled street that twisted and turned out of sight, lined with the most extraordinary shops Harry had ever seen. "Welcome," said Dumbledore, "to Diagon Alley." Harry couldn't help but gape as they walked past shops selling cauldrons, broomsticks, and owls. People in colorful robes bustled about, carrying parcels wrapped in shimmering paper. A group of children pressed their noses against a window displaying what appeared to be a golden ball with wings. "This is brilliant," Harry breathed. "And there's been a whole magical world here all along." "Indeed, though this is merely one small corner of it. The magical community exists alongside the Muggle one throughout Britain and the world, hidden in plain sight." At the end of the street stood a snowy white building that towered over the neighboring shops. Standing beside its burnished bronze doors was a creature about a head shorter than Harry, with a pointed beard, clever dark eyes, and very long fingers. "A goblin," Dumbledore explained quietly. "Gringotts is run by goblins, extremely intelligent beings who take banking very seriously. It would be unwise to underestimate them." The goblin bowed as they passed. Harry, not wanting to be rude, bowed back, which caused the goblin to look at him with surprise. Inside, they found themselves in a vast marble hall where about 100 more goblins sat behind a long counter, weighing coins, examining jewels, and recording figures in large ledgers. Dumbledore approached one of the free goblins. "Good afternoon," he said. "We're here about a special vault." The goblin peered down at them. "And which vault might that be, Professor Dumbledore?" Dumbledore leaned forward and spoke in a lower voice. "The Emery's vault." The goblin's eyes widened fractionally, then darted to Harry, lingering on his forehead. "I see. And does the young gentleman have his key?" "That's just it," Dumbledore said. "We believe that he is the key." The goblin studied Harry for a long moment, then nodded. "Griphook will take you. This way, please." They followed another goblin through a side door and into a narrow stone passageway lit by flaming torches. A small cart waited on tracks that disappeared into darkness. As they climbed in, Harry felt a strange tingling at the base of his skull, a pull toward the depths below. The cart took off at breathtaking speed, hurtling through a maze of twisting passages. They plunged deeper and deeper, passing an underground lake and what Harry could have sworn was a burst of dragon flame. Finally, the cart stopped beside a platform where the tracks seemed to end. The Emery's vault has not been opened in centuries, Griphook said, stepping from the cart. It predates the bank itself. What does Emery's mean? Harry asked, finding his voice. It was one of the names of Merlin, Dumbledore explained, helping Harry onto the platform. The greatest wizard to ever live. He served at King Arthur's court and helped establish many of the foundations of modern magical society. Griphook led them to a blank wall of solid rock. If the vault will open for anyone, it will be here. Harry looked around in confusion. But there's nothing here. That, said Dumbledore, is the question we're here to answer. Something tugged at Harry's consciousness, a wordless call that seemed to vibrate through his very bones. Without thinking, he stepped forward and placed his palm against the cold stone. The effect was immediate and extraordinary. The rock rippled like water beneath his touch, golden light spreading outward from his hand in intricate patterns that resembled ancient writing. The stone wall transformed before their eyes, revealing a massive doorway carved with scenes of knights, dragons, and a crowned king receiving a sword from a robed figure. Griphook made a choking sound. Impossible, he whispered. The legends were true. Harry barely heard him. The tugging sensation had intensified to an insistent pull that he couldn't ignore. As if in a trance, he stepped through the doorway into darkness. Lumos, Dumbledore murmured behind him, and light bloomed from the tip of his wand, revealing a circular chamber hewn from living rock. At its center stood a raised dais, and embedded in that dais was a stone plinth. From this plinth emerged the hilt of a sword, gleaming gold and silver despite the centuries of darkness. Excalibur, breathed Dumbledore. The sword of King Arthur. Harry approached slowly, drawn by a force he couldn't explain. The sword seemed to pulse with its own light, calling to him. Ancient memories stirred at the edges of his consciousness, memories that couldn't possibly be his own. Harry, Dumbledore said gently, legend has it that only the true heir of Arthur, or Merlin himself, could draw the sword from its resting place. Harry barely registered the words. He reached for the hilt as if it were the most natural thing in the world. His fingers closed around the grip, and a surge of power coursed through him, ancient and familiar all at once. He pulled. The sword slid free effortlessly, as if it had been waiting for him. Light exploded from the blade, filling the chamber with brilliance. Harry raised Excalibur above his head, and knowledge flooded his mind, not just knowledge, but memories, experiences, an entire lifetime. Many lifetimes. I remember, he whispered, his voice somehow deeper than before. I remember everything. Then the world went dark. Harry awoke in an unfamiliar room, sunlight streaming through tall windows onto a comfortable four-poster bed. The walls were lined with bookshelves, and strange silver instruments whirred and puffed on various tables. Ah, you're awake, said Dumbledore, appearing at his bedside with a cup of steaming hot chocolate. How do you feel? Harry sat up slowly. His head felt strange, fuller somehow, as if his 6 years of life had been supplemented with centuries more experience. Memories swirled just below the surface of his thoughts, accessible yet not overwhelming. Different, he said finally. Where am I? My home in Godric's Hollow. I thought it best not to return you to the Dursleys immediately, given the circumstances. Dumbledore handed him the hot chocolate. You've been asleep for nearly 2 days. And the sword? Dumbledore nodded toward a corner of the room, where Excalibur rested against the wall, its blade gleaming impossibly bright even in the shadows. No one but you can touch it now, Dumbledore explained. I tried, merely to move it to a safer location, and it became hot as a forge fire. Harry nodded as if this made perfect sense. It was always temperamental about who could wield it. He paused, startled by his own words. How do I know that? I believe, Dumbledore said, settling into a chair beside the bed, that when you touched the sword, it awakened memories within you, memories of a past life. Harry, there is growing evidence that you may be the reincarnation of Merlin himself. Harry stared into his hot chocolate, watching the steam curl upward. The idea should have seemed absurd, yet it resonated with a truth he felt in his bones. I remember a castle, different from the pictures in books. I remember a king with golden hair and a queen with sad eyes. I remember. He trailed off, overwhelmed by the fragments of memory. What you're experiencing is extraordinary, Dumbledore said. There have been documented cases of wizards and witches recalling past lives, but never with such clarity, and never with such significance. What happens now? Harry asked, looking up from his drink. Do I have to go back to the Dursleys? Dumbledore's expression grew serious. That is a complex question. The magical protection your mother left you is tied to your aunt's home. However, he added, seeing Harry's face fall, given these new developments, arrangements might be made for a more suitable guardianship. Harry felt a surge of hope. Could I stay in the magical world? We must proceed carefully. If word got out about what happened at Gringotts, about who you might truly be. Dumbledore shook his head. There are those who would seek to control or exploit such power, and others who might fear it. Like Voldemort? Harry asked, the name rising to his lips unbidden. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. Yes. Though I wonder how you know that name. Harry frowned, trying to sort through the tangle of memories. I think Merlin could see glimpses of the future. Not clearly, but impressions. Threats. Warnings. He looked up at Dumbledore. He knew a darkness would come, and that's why he left Excalibur for the one who would need it. Fascinating, Dumbledore murmured. And concerning. If Merlin foresaw Voldemort, what else might he have anticipated? Harry closed his eyes, trying to focus on the fragments of foresight buried among the ancient memories. There's something coming, something older than Voldemort. Something that's been waiting. He opened his eyes, frustrated. I can't see it clearly. Perhaps that's for the best, for now, Dumbledore said gently. You're still a child, Harry, despite the ancient soul you may carry. We must give you time to grow into these memories, this power. But I have to learn, Harry insisted, a sudden urgency gripping him. I have to be ready. Dumbledore studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Yes, I believe you do. Which brings me to my proposal. He steepled his fingers. I suggest a compromise. You will return to the Dursleys for part of each year, to maintain the blood protection. But you will also receive special training from selected mentors who can help you understand and develop your unique abilities. And Excalibur? The sword goes where you go, though we may need to disguise it. Even in the magical world, such an artifact would attract dangerous attention. Harry nodded, then paused. Sir, in the bank, when the wall changed, the goblin seemed surprised that it worked. Why did you take me there if you weren't sure I could open it? Dumbledore's lips curved in a small smile. I had a theory. For years, I've been researching ancient prophecies about Merlin's return. When your magical outbursts began showing patterns consistent with those prophecies, commanding elemental magic without training, speaking to magical creatures, healing injuries, I decided it was time to test my hypothesis. And now? Now, we prepare you. Discreetly. Dumbledore rose. Rest today. Tomorrow, we'll begin arranging your education. The following years passed in a blur of intensive training. Harry spent summers and holidays at the Dursleys, where he learned to control his growing powers to avoid incidents. The rest of the year, he studied with various tutors arranged by Dumbledore, experts in magical combat, history, ancient runes, and elemental manipulation. Excalibur remained his constant companion, disguised as a simple pendant around his neck when not in use. In private, Harry practiced with the legendary blade, which seemed to respond to his thoughts as much as his movements. Sometimes, during these sessions, more memories would surface, techniques used centuries ago, battles fought alongside Arthur and his knights. Through it all, Harry struggled to integrate his two selves. He was both Harry Potter, an orphaned boy with a destiny tied to Voldemort, and he was Merlin reborn, with knowledge and power beyond his years. Sometimes the ancient memories felt distant, like stories he'd read rather than experiences he'd lived. Other times, they were so vivid he would forget which century he was in. By his 11th birthday, Harry had mastered wandless magic that most adult wizards couldn't perform with wands, could speak 5 languages including gobbledygook and Mermish, and had begun experimenting with weather manipulation. Yet for all his progress, Dumbledore insisted on maintaining the original plan: Harry would attend Hogwarts like any other young wizard. But why? Harry demanded during one of their last sessions before his first term was to begin. They stood in a secluded clearing in the Forest of Dean, where Harry had just successfully called down lightning to shatter a boulder. "I've already learned more than they teach in 7 years at Hogwarts." "In some areas, yes," Dumbledore acknowledged. "But not in all. More importantly, Hogwarts offers something your private education cannot: peers, friendships, the chance to be Harry as well as Merlin." Harry scowled, an expression that looked oddly out of place on his young face. "I don't need friends. I need to prepare. The visions are getting stronger." It was true. As his powers had grown, so too had the prophetic glimpses, fragmented images of battles to come, of ancient enemies stirring, of a darkness that predated even Voldemort's rise. Dumbledore placed a hand on Harry's shoulder. "What you're seeing may not come to pass for years, perhaps decades. And when it does, you won't face it alone. That's why Hogwarts matters. Your greatest strength as Merlin was never your magic, but your ability to inspire loyalty, to bring together disparate allies under a common cause." Harry's expression softened. "The Round Table." "Exactly. And I suspect you may find some familiar souls at Hogwarts, ones who have returned just as you have." This gave Harry pause. In all his memories as Merlin, the faces of Arthur's knights remained the most vivid. The thought that they too might be reborn, waiting to be found. "All right," he conceded. "I'll go. But I won't pretend to be a normal first year." "I wouldn't dream of asking you to," Dumbledore said with a twinkle in his eye. "Though perhaps you could try not to terrify the teaching staff too thoroughly on your first day." Harry's letter had arrived like any other student's, delivered by owl to the Dursley residence where he was spending the final weeks of summer. Though he'd known it was coming, holding the heavy parchment envelope still filled him with a peculiar excitement. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry Headmaster, Albus Dumbledore, Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Source, CHF, Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Confede, of Wizards. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Harry smiled at the irony of being invited to join the Order of Merlin, then tucked the letter away before Aunt Petunia could see it. The Dursleys had maintained a careful distance from Harry over the years, neither mistreating him nor showing him any genuine affection. They had been informed in no uncertain terms by Dumbledore that Harry's education was being supplemented by special tutors, but they didn't know the extent of his abilities or his true nature. Just as well, Harry thought. Uncle Vernon would probably have a heart attack if he knew he had Merlin living under his roof. A week later, Harry stood in Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions, being fitted for his school uniform. Though he could have easily transfigured any clothing to fit perfectly, Dumbledore had insisted he follow the traditional preparations for Hogwarts, partly for appearances, and partly, Harry suspected, to give him the full experience of being an ordinary student, if only for a few moments. As he stood on a footstool, arms outstretched while a magical tape measure darted around him, another boy entered the shop. He had a pale, pointed face, white blonde hair, and a distinctly superior expression. "Hogwarts too?" the boy asked. Harry nodded, something about the boy's face triggering a faint sense of recognition, not from his memories as Merlin, but from something more recent. "My father's next door buying my books and mother's up the street looking at wands," the boy continued in a bored, drawling voice. "Then I'm going to drag them off to look at racing brooms. I don't see why first years can't have their own. I think I'll bully father into getting me one and I'll smuggle it in somehow." Harry raised an eyebrow. That seems unnecessarily complicated. There are at least 3 secret passages into the grounds that could accommodate a broom without detection. The blond boy looked startled. How would you know that? I read, Harry replied simply, though the truth was that he remembered designing some of those passages himself, centuries ago when helping the founders construct the castle. Well, do you have your own broom? The boy asked, clearly trying to regain control of the conversation. No. I prefer other methods of flight. Other methods? What are you talking about? Before Harry could answer, Madame Malkin declared his fitting complete. As he stepped down from the footstool, the pendant containing Excalibur slipped out from beneath his shirt, catching the light. The blond boy's eyes widened. What's that? It looks ancient. Harry tucked the pendant away. Family heirloom. I'll see you at Hogwarts, I expect. As he paid for his robes, Harry reflected on the encounter. The boy seemed arrogant, but there was something familiar about him that Harry couldn't quite place, not a direct connection to his memories as Merlin, but something more nebulous, a sense of potential that might be shaped for good or ill. The rest of his shopping proceeded without incident, though he did have an interesting conversation with the wand maker, Ollivander, who seemed perplexed when none of his wands responded properly to Harry. Most curious, the old man had murmured, his silvery eyes fixed on Harry's face. It's almost as if you already have a perfect channel for your magic. Harry had simply smiled and purchased a wand anyway, holly and phoenix feather, a good match according to Ollivander, though it felt redundant in Harry's hand. Excalibur was all the focus he needed, but having a wand would help maintain appearances. On the morning of September 1st, Harry stood on platform 9 3/4, watching families bid tearful farewells to their children. A pang of longing struck him, not for his own parents, whom he barely remembered, but for the companions of his past life. Arthur, Guinevere, Lancelot, Gawain. Would he truly find them again at Hogwarts, as Dumbledore suggested? The Hogwarts Express gleamed scarlet against the platform, steam billowing from its engine. Harry boarded, finding an empty compartment near the back of the train. He settled in, Excalibur hanging at his side, now disguised as an ordinary silver pendant. As the train pulled away from the station, the compartment door slid open to reveal a tall, lanky boy with red hair and a freckled face. Anyone sitting there? He asked, pointing to the seat opposite Harry. Everywhere else is full. Not at all, Harry replied, gesturing for him to sit. The boy's aura had a familiar warmth to it, though Harry couldn't quite place it yet. I'm Ron. Ron Weasley, the boy said, sticking out his hand. Harry Potter, Harry replied, shaking it. Ron's eyes widened. Are you really? Do you have the, you know? He pointed to his forehead. Harry smiled faintly and lifted his fringe to reveal the lightning-shaped scar. Wicked, Ron breathed. So is it true? Did you really defeat you-know-who when you were just a baby? That's what they tell me, though I don't remember it, Harry said. This wasn't entirely true, he'd been having fragmented visions of that night, though they seemed connected more to his identity as Harry than to his memories as Merlin. Their conversation was interrupted when the compartment door slid open again. A girl with bushy brown hair and rather large front teeth stood in the doorway. Has anyone seen a toad? A boy named Neville's lost one, she said in a bossy sort of voice. No toads here, Ron replied, but Harry might be able to help. He's Harry Potter. The girl's eyes widened slightly, but instead of the usual awestruck reaction to his name, she seemed more interested in how he might help. Can you? She asked. Help find the toad, I mean. Harry nodded, closing his eyes briefly. He extended his senses outward, feeling for the small, confused consciousness of a lost amphibian. 3 cars down, behind a heating pipe. He's quite comfortable there, actually. The girl stared at him. How could you possibly know that? Harry smiled. Magic. She frowned, clearly not satisfied with this answer. That's not in any of the first-year spells I've read about. I've memorized all our course books, of course. I'm Hermione Granger, by the way. As she spoke, Harry felt a stronger flash of recognition. There was something about her, a fierceness of spirit, an unwavering loyalty buried beneath the bookish exterior, that resonated with one of his oldest memories. Could she be? You should check behind that heating pipe, he said simply. If I'm wrong, feel free to come back and tell me so. Looking skeptical but intrigued, Hermione left. Ron shook his head in amazement. How did you really know where the toad was? He asked. I can sense magical creatures, Harry explained, deciding a partial truth was simplest. It's a knack I've always had. Ron looked impressed. Wish I had a knack like that. All I've got are 5 older brothers to live up to. As the train journey continued, Harry found himself enjoying Ron's company. There was something refreshingly straightforward about the redhead, a kind of steadfast quality that reminded Harry of someone. The memory hovered just out of reach, but he was increasingly certain that Ron was connected to his past. Hermione returned shortly, looking both impressed and suspicious. The toad was exactly where you said it would be. How did you do that? Harry shrugged. Just a feeling. She pursed her lips, clearly not accepting this non-answer, but before she could press further, the compartment door slid open once more. The pale boy from Madame Malkin stood there, flanked by 2 larger boys who looked like bodyguards. Is it true? He said. They're saying all down the train that Harry Potter's in this compartment. So it's you, is it? Yes, Harry said simply, studying the boy more carefully. There was still that nagging sense of familiarity, but it felt, distorted somehow, as if this boy were a shadow of someone Harry had once known. This is Crabbe and Goyle, the boy said carelessly, indicating his companions. And my name's Malfoy. Draco Malfoy. Ron gave a slight cough that might have been hiding a snigger. Draco looked at him. Think my name's funny, do you? No need to ask who you are. My father told me all the Weasleys have red hair, freckles, and more children than they can afford. Harry felt a surge of irritation. I'd be careful about judging people by their families, Draco. History has shown that's rarely a sound basis for forming alliances. Draco's pale eyes narrowed. You'll soon find out some wizarding families are much better than others, Potter. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort. I can help you there. He held out his hand to shake, but Harry didn't take it. I think I can tell the wrong sort for myself, thanks, he said coolly. Though I suspect there's more to you than your father's prejudices, if you're willing to think for yourself. Draco's cheeks flushed pink. For a moment, he looked uncertain, as if no one had ever suggested he form his own opinions before. Then his expression hardened. You'll regret that, Potter. People who cross me tend to meet unfortunate ends. As the boy turned to leave, Harry called after him. Threats rarely impress those worth impressing, Draco. Consider that. The door slammed shut, leaving an awkward silence in the compartment. Ron looked at Harry with a mixture of awe and confusion. That was brilliant, he said finally. But weird. Why'd you talk to Malfoy like that? His whole family were followers of you-know-who. Harry gazed at the closed door thoughtfully. Because sometimes people become what others expect them to be. And sometimes they surprise you. Hermione, who had remained quiet during the exchange, was watching Harry with undisguised curiosity. You don't talk like a normal 11-year-old. Harry turned to her with a smile. Neither do you, from what I've observed. She blushed slightly. Well, I read a lot. So do I, Harry replied. Knowledge is power, especially in uncertain times. The rest of the journey passed in companionable conversation. As the landscape outside grew wilder and the sky darkened, Harry felt a growing anticipation. They were drawing closer to Hogwarts, to the castle that had been part of his original vision for magical education, though the founders had modified his plans considerably. When at last the train slowed to a stop at Hogsmeade Station, Harry stepped onto the platform with a curious feeling of homecoming. The voice of Hagrid, the enormous groundskeeper, called for the first years to follow him down to the lake, where a fleet of small boats waited to carry them to the castle. As Harry climbed into a boat with Ron, Hermione, and a round-faced boy who must have been Neville, he felt the pendant containing Excalibur grow warm against his skin. The sword was responding to the ancient magic of Hogwarts, magic that Merlin himself had helped weave into the very stones of the castle. The fleet of boats glided across the black glass surface of the lake, and when they rounded a bend, the castle came into view for the first time, a vast structure of towers and turrets perched atop a high mountain, its windows sparkling in the starry sky. Harry heard the collective gasp of the other first years, but his own reaction was more complex. The castle was at once familiar and strange, recognizable from his ancient memories, yet changed by the centuries, additions and modifications altering his original vision. Still, the core remained, and within those walls lay secrets known only to him, passages and chambers that even Dumbledore had never discovered. As their boat bumped gently into the underground harbor beneath the castle, Harry felt a presence, several presences, in fact, watching him from the shadows. Not physical beings, but magical entities woven into the very fabric of Hogwarts, guardians he himself had placed there long ago. They recognize me, he realized with a jolt. They know their creator has returned. The first years disembarked and followed Hagrid up a flight of stone steps to the enormous oak front doors of the castle. As Hagrid raised his gigantic fist to knock, Harry felt Excalibur pulse once more against his chest. "We're home," he whispered to the sword. "And this time, we'll be ready." The doors swung open, revealing a stern-looking witch in emerald-green robes, Professor McGonagall, Dumbledore had told him. As she led them into the entrance hall, Harry noticed how the ambient magic of the castle seemed to bend subtly toward him, like iron filings drawn to a magnet. McGonagall explained the sorting ceremony in the 4 houses, then left them momentarily to prepare the Great Hall. Nervous whispers broke out among the first years, speculating about how exactly they would be sorted. "Some sort of test, I think," Ron was saying anxiously. "Fred said it hurts a lot, but I think he was joking." Harry smiled. "It's just a hat," he said quietly. "The sorting hat. It looks into your mind and sees where you belong." Ron stared at him. "How do you know that?" "I read Hogwarts, a history," Hermione answered before Harry could, looking impressed. "But it doesn't go into detail about how the hat actually works." "The founders enchanted it," Harry explained, knowing this was only partially true. The enchantment had been his design, though the founders had implemented it after his time. Gryffindor provided his own hat, and they all poured their magic and intentions into it. Before anyone could question him further, McGonagall returned and led them into the Great Hall. Harry walked past the 4 long house tables, aware of hundreds of eyes following their progress. The ceiling above was enchanted to show the night sky, a spell he remembered designing with Rowena Ravenclaw. At the front of the hall stood a 4-legged stool, upon which sat a patched, frayed, and extremely dirty pointed wizard's hat. For a moment there was complete silence, then the hat twitched and a rip near the brim opened wide like a mouth as it began to sing. Harry listened with amusement as the hat described the 4 houses. When it finished, the hall burst into applause, and Professor McGonagall stepped forward with a long roll of parchment. "When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit on the stool to be sorted," she said. "Abbott, Hannah." As the sorting progressed, Harry observed each student carefully, looking for signs of the souls he'd known in his past life. Hermione was sorted into Gryffindor after nearly a full minute with the hat on her head, which confirmed Harry's growing suspicion about her identity. The sorting hat would have sensed the echo of her past self, making the decision more complex. When Potter, Harry, was finally called, whispers broke out across the hall. Harry walked forward with calm confidence, feeling Excalibur's warmth against his chest. As the hat dropped over his eyes, he heard a small, surprised voice in his ear. "Well, well, well, what have we here? My creator returns." I never thought I'd see the day. Hello, old friend, Harry thought back. You've served the school well. And now you've returned, and as Harry Potter no less. The boy who lived and Merlin reborn in one body, what extraordinary times these are. Now, where to put you? You have qualities of all four houses, as you should, having inspired them all. Put me where I'll find those I seek, Harry replied silently. I suspect I know where that will be. Yes, I see them too, the echoes of the old souls awakening in new bodies. Very well, if you're certain, better be Gryffindor. The last word was shouted to the whole hall. Harry removed the hat and walked toward the Gryffindor table, which had erupted into wild cheers. As he sat down beside Hermione, he caught Dumbledore's eye at the staff table. The headmaster raised his goblet slightly in acknowledgement, his eyes twinkling. The rest of the sorting concluded with Ron joining them in Gryffindor, looking relieved. As food appeared on the golden plates, Harry felt a deep contentment. He was home, and more importantly, he wasn't alone. The knights were here, or at least, their reincarnations were, waiting to be awakened to their true purpose. I know it's going to sound mad, Ron said as he piled his plate with food, but I feel like I've known you for years, Harry. Isn't that weird? Harry smiled. Not weird at all. In fact, I'd say it makes perfect sense. Across the hall, he caught sight of Draco Malfoy at the Slytherin table, watching him with an unreadable expression. There was something there too, not a knight, but someone from his past. Someone important. Up at the high table, Harry's gaze fell on a hook-nosed teacher with greasy black hair who was staring at him with an expression of mingled shock and loathing. As their eyes met, Harry felt a sharp pain in his scar. Who's that teacher talking to Professor Quirrell? He asked Percy Weasley, Ron's older brother, while rubbing his forehead. That's Professor Snape, the potions master, Percy replied. Though he's always wanted Quirrell's job. Knows an awful lot about the dark arts, Snape. Harry studied both professors carefully. There was something strange about Quirrell, a kind of shadowy aura that didn't match his nervous demeanor. And Snape. Harry sensed deep wounds there, and a connection to his past that he couldn't yet place. As the feast concluded and Dumbledore gave his start-of-term notices, Harry felt the castle's magic pulse around him once more. Something was stirring within the ancient walls, not just the guardians he'd placed there long ago, but other forces as well. Darker currents that had seeped into the foundations over the centuries. When they were dismissed, Harry followed Percy through the castle to Gryffindor Tower, mentally noting how the layout had changed since he'd helped design it. The portrait of the fat lady swung forward to reveal the common room after Percy gave the password, Caput Draconis, and Harry felt another wave of recognition. This room, at least, was much as he remembered planning it, the cozy circular tower with its squashy armchairs, tables, and crackling fire. It felt like the kind of place where knights might gather to rest after a quest, which had been exactly his intention. As the boys climbed the spiral staircase to their dormitory, Ron yawned widely. Mental day, wasn't it? He said as they found their beds. Can't believe I'm friends with Harry Potter. Wait till I tell my sister, she's got all these storybooks about you. Harry smiled as he pulled his pajamas from his trunk. Storybooks rarely get things right. I'm just Harry. But as he lay in his four-poster bed listening to the breathing of his dorm mates, hand wrapped around the pendant containing Excalibur, Harry knew that wasn't entirely true. He was Harry Potter, yes, the orphan boy destined to face Voldemort. But he was also Merlin reborn, returned in a time of gathering darkness to fulfill an ancient purpose. And somewhere in this castle were the reincarnated souls of those who had fought alongside him centuries ago, Arthur and his knights, waiting to be awakened to their true nature. Finding them would be his first task. Above the castle, stars wheeled in the enchanted ceiling of the great hall, forming patterns that spoke of prophecy and return, of ancient enemies stirring and battles yet to come. The pieces were moving, the board being set. The game had begun. Chapter 2, The Knights Gather. Harry woke before his roommates, the pale September sun barely cresting the horizon. Excalibur hummed against his chest, a gentle vibration that had grown more insistent since their arrival at Hogwarts. The sword was trying to tell him something. He slipped from his bed, padding silently to the dormitory window. The ground stretched before him, the lake, the forest, the distant mountains, all bathed in the golden light of dawn. Somewhere in this ancient place were the souls he sought, reborn into new bodies, unaware of their true nature. "Where are you, old friends?" he whispered, his breath fogging the glass. An image flashed in his mind, a circular table, 13 chairs, and a silver light connecting them all. Then it was gone. Couldn't sleep either. Harry turned to find Ron sitting up in bed, red hair tousled, eyes still heavy with sleep. "Just thinking," Harry replied. Ron yawned. "About what?" "About how some friendships feel like they've existed forever," Harry said carefully, studying Ron's aura. There was definitely something there, a ghostly overlay of armor and a sword, barely perceptible. As if they were meant to be. "Yeah." Ron frowned, rubbing his temple. "Funny you should say that. Had a weird dream about you. We were fighting something, but not like kids fighting. Like knights or something." He laughed self-consciously. "Mental, right?" Harry smiled. "Not so mental. Dreams can tell us more than we realize." Ron shrugged, clearly embarrassed by the direction of the conversation. "Whatever you say. Come on, let's get breakfast before Seamus eats everything." As they headed down to the Great Hall, Harry sensed the castle responding to his presence. Torches flared brighter as he passed, suits of armor turned their helmets to follow his movement, and the staircases shifted to create the most direct path to their destination. Small acknowledgments from the semi-sentient magic he had woven into the stones centuries ago. The Great Hall buzzed with excited chatter as students received their class schedules. Harry scanned the Gryffindor table, searching for familiar auras among unfamiliar faces. He'd caught glimpses the night before, ghostly overlays of armor, swords, and shields surrounding certain students, but in the light of day, he needed to look closer. Hermione sat a few seats away, already buried in a textbook while absently stirring her porridge. The overlay around her was one of the strongest, not a knight, but someone equally important from his past. Someone who had stood at the center of everything. "Schedules," announced Percy, handing out parchments along the table. "First years have Transfiguration with Professor McGonagall this morning." Harry took his schedule with a nod of thanks, then froze as another student brushed past him to sit down. Neville Longbottom, the round-faced boy who'd lost his toad on the train. For a split second, Harry saw him surrounded by a golden aura, a crowned figure holding Excalibur aloft. Arthur. The realization hit Harry with such force that he nearly dropped his schedule. Of course, the boy's innate nobility masked by crippling self-doubt, his magical core hampered by fear rather than lack of power. How had he not seen it immediately? "Harry?" Ron was looking at him strangely. "You all right, mate? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," Harry said, recovering. "Just remembered something important." Before he could process the implications, a sudden hush fell over the Great Hall. A tall man in impeccable dark robes had entered, flanked by two official-looking wizards. His silver-tipped cane tapped a deliberate rhythm on the stone floor as he approached the staff table. "Who's that?" Harry asked, though he could guess from the man's aristocratic bearing and platinum blonde hair. "Lucius Malfoy," Ron whispered, scowling. "Draco's father. He's on the school board of governors. Dad can't stand him, says he bought his way in after claiming he was under the Imperius curse during the war." Harry observed the way Malfoy leaned close to Dumbledore, speaking in hushed but clearly heated tones. The headmaster's expression remained pleasantly neutral, but Harry could sense the tension beneath. "What's he doing here on the first day?" Hermione asked, having abandoned her book to watch the exchange. "Nothing good," Ron muttered. Harry focused, extending his senses toward the conversation. Merlin's abilities had included enhanced hearing when needed, and though the skill had been rusty at first, Harry had been practicing. Completely unacceptable, Dumbledore, Malfoy was saying. The Ministry has a right to know if what the goblins are claiming is true. A missing artifact of that significance. The Ministry has been informed of all relevant developments, Lucius, Dumbledore replied calmly. As I'm sure Minister Fudge has told you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a school to run. Malfoy's hand tightened on his cane, knuckles widening. This isn't over. The Unspeakables are very interested in the vault breach, and in Potter's involvement. If you won't cooperate willingly, is that a threat, Mr. Malfoy? McGonagall interrupted, her Scottish brogue more pronounced with anger. Merely an observation, Professor. Malfoy's gaze swept the hall, landing briefly on Harry before returning to Dumbledore. We'll speak again. As he turned to leave, his eyes met Harry's once more. This time, Harry didn't look away. He met Malfoy's stare evenly, allowing just a hint of Merlin's power to surface, enough that the torches nearest him flared brighter for a moment. Malfoy's eyes widened almost imperceptibly before he turned on his heel and strode from the hall, lackeys in tow. What was that about? Ron asked. He looked right at you. Politics, Harry said simply, returning to his breakfast. We should get to class. Their first week at Hogwarts passed in a blur of new experiences. Harry found himself oddly enjoying the basic classes, despite having mastered most of the material years before. There was something satisfying about learning magic the traditional way, even if he could perform most spells wandlessly and without incantation. He was careful to moderate his abilities in front of professors and students alike, using his wand and pronouncing incantations like everyone else, though with flawless execution. Only occasionally did he allow glimpses of greater power, transfiguring his matchstick into a needle on the first try in McGonagall's class, producing a perfect boil cure in Snape's dungeon despite the professor's attempts to unnerve him. How do you do that? Hermione demanded after charms, where Harry had levitated his feather with a casual flick of his wand while others struggled for the entire period. You barely practice, yet everything works perfectly for you. Harry smiled. I could say the same about you. Your spell work is exceptional. She flushed at the compliment but persisted. It's different. I study constantly. You just do it, like you've been casting magic for decades. Centuries, actually, Harry thought but didn't say. Instead, he merely shrugged. I suppose I have a knack for it. It's more than a knack, she insisted, keeping pace as they headed toward the Great Hall for lunch. I've read about magical prodigies, but even they have to practice. You don't. Maybe I practice before Hogwarts, Harry suggested, which wasn't untrue. Hermione's eyes narrowed. That's not possible. Underage magic is monitored, and wands are restricted before school. There are other ways to learn. Before she could press further, a crowd in the entrance hall caught their attention. Students were gathered around a notice board where a new announcement had been posted. What's going on? Ron asked, joining them after trailing behind to discuss Quidditch with Dean Thomas. A fifth year nearby answered. Ministry's sending a delegation to Hogwarts next week. Some educational inspection rubbish. In September. Hermione frowned. That's not standard procedure. Inspections usually happen in the spring, according to Hogwarts, a history. Harry moved closer to read the notice. By order of the Ministry of Magic, a delegation from the Department of Magical Education will be conducting an assessment of curriculum standards and student welfare at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, beginning Monday next. All students are expected to attend classes as normal and cooperate fully with Ministry officials. By authority of Cornelius Fudge, Minister for Magic, this isn't about education, Harry murmured, too low for anyone but Hermione and Ron to hear. They're looking for something. Or someone. What do you mean? Hermione asked. Harry glanced around at the crowded hallway. Not here. Come with me. He led them down a corridor, then another, taking 3 quick turns until they reached a section of the castle that seemed older than the rest. The stones here were rougher, the arches more primitive in design. Hermione looked around with interest. "I don't recognize this part of the castle," she said. "Is it on the standard floor plan?" "No," Harry replied, stopping before a blank wall. "This section predates most of the current structure. It was part of the original foundation." Ron looked confused. "How could you possibly know that?" Harry placed his palm against the ancient stone, whispering words in a language neither of his friends recognized. The wall shimmered and dissolved, revealing a small circular chamber with a stone bench running around its circumference. Torches flared to life as they entered. "Bloody hell," Ron breathed. "What is this place?" "A council chamber," Harry explained, feeling Excalibur grow warm beneath his shirt. "From the days when Hogwarts was first built." The chamber was simple but elegant, with a domed ceiling etched with constellations that slowly rotated above them. In the center of the floor was a mosaic depicting a sword plunged into a stone, surrounded by 13 smaller stones arranged in a circle. Hermione turned slowly, taking it all in. "This is incredible. How did you know it was here?" "This isn't mentioned in any book I've read about Hogwarts." "I've had visions of this place," Harry said carefully, choosing a partial truth. "Since touching the sword in Gringotts." "What sword?" Ron asked, frowning. Harry sighed, realizing he'd said more than intended. "You should both sit down. There are things I need to tell you." He explained about Dumbledore taking him to Gringotts when he was 6, about pulling Excalibur from the stone, and about the memories and abilities that had awakened in him. He left out the details about being Merlin reborn, saying only that he had some kind of connection to Arthurian magic. When he finished, both friends stared at him in stunned silence. "So that's how you know all this stuff," Ron said eventually. "And why you're so good at magic." "It's why the Ministry is interested in me," Harry confirmed. "They know something happened at Gringotts, the goblins must have reported it, but they don't know exactly what. That's why they're sending this delegation. They want to assess me." Hermione's brow furrowed. "But why now?" "It's been 5 years since you found the sword." "Because the magic is getting stronger," Harry admitted. "When I came to Hogwarts, something changed. The castle recognizes me, responds to me. And I'm starting to recognize others, people connected to the Arthurian legend who have been reborn, like." He stopped, unsure how much to reveal. "Like who?" Ron prompted. "Like you," Harry said quietly. "Both of you." The silence that followed was profound. Hermione's eyes widened in shock, while Ron's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally a dawning recognition. "That's why I had that dream," Ron whispered. "And why I felt like I'd known you forever." "Who were we?" Hermione asked, her voice barely audible. Harry hesitated. "I'm still figuring that out. The memories aren't always clear. But I believe Ron was one of Arthur's most trusted knights." "And you, Hermione?" He paused. "You were someone central to everything. Someone whose wisdom shaped the course of history." She nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something she'd suspected but couldn't articulate. "I've been having strange dreams too. About a round table and a golden cup." "The Grail," Harry murmured. "Yes, that makes sense." A bell rang distantly, signaling the end of lunch. "We should go," Hermione said, standing. "We'll be late for defense against the dark arts." "One moment," Harry said, reaching beneath his shirt to withdraw the pendant containing Excalibur. It glowed softly in his palm. "There's something you should see." He closed his eyes, concentrating, and the pendant expanded, transforming into a magnificent sword with a golden hilt inlaid with jewels. Ron gasped, stumbling back a step, while Hermione remained frozen, eyes fixed on the legendary blade. "Excalibur," she breathed. Harry nodded. "It's how I found this chamber." The sword remembers the old places, the old magic. He reversed the process, the sword shrinking back into a pendant that he tucked away. I'm trusting you both with this secret. The Ministry can't know, not yet. Nor can anyone else. Of course not, Hermione said quickly. Bloody hell, Ron muttered, shaking his head in amazement. My best mate is some kind of Arthurian wizard. Harry smiled. And my best friends are reincarnated heroes. Come on, we're late for class. As they hurried toward the defense classroom, Harry felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He wasn't alone anymore, the first pieces were falling into place, the first knights awakening to their heritage. Professor Quirrell's classroom smelled strongly of garlic, which according to rumor was to ward off a vampire he'd met in Romania. The professor himself was a nervous, stuttering man who seemed afraid of his own shadow, and his students. Welcome to D Defense Against the D Dark Arts, he stammered, twisting his hands anxiously. Today we'll be learning about basic D defensive theory. As Quirrell turned to write on the blackboard, Harry felt a sharp pain in his scar. It had happened several times since the start of term, always in Quirrell's presence. He rubbed his forehead, frowning. You all right? Ron whispered. Harry nodded, but kept his eyes on Quirrell. There was something wrong about the man, not just his obvious nervous act, but something darker. A shadow that clung to him, particularly around the back of his head where that ridiculous purple turban sat. Closing his eyes briefly, Harry extended his magical senses toward the professor. Immediately, he recoiled as if struck. Beneath the stuttering exterior lurked a malevolence so familiar it made his blood run cold. Voldemort. Somehow, impossibly, the Dark Lord's essence was attached to Quirrell like a parasite. Not fully corporeal, but not a mere spirit either. Harry's hand instinctively went to Excalibur, which burned hot against his skin in warning. Mr. Peapotter, Quirrell's voice interrupted his thoughts. Perhaps you could tell us the first principle of magical defense? Harry met the professor's gaze steadily, wondering if Voldemort could see through those eyes. Awareness, he replied, infusing the word with meaning. Being conscious of the threats around you, even those that are disguised. Something flickered in Quirrell's expression, a momentary hardening, a flash of calculation, before the nervous mask returned. See correct. 5 points to Gryffindor. For the remainder of the lesson, Harry felt Quirrell's attention repeatedly returning to him. Not the bumbling teachers, but the sharper, colder focus of whatever lurked beneath. Harry maintained his facade of ordinary student, all while his mind raced with implications. Voldemort was here, at Hogwarts. Weakened, hidden, but present. And there was only one reason he would risk such exposure: he was hunting for something. After class, Harry held Ron and Hermione back until the other students had departed. We need to talk, he said urgently. Not here, outside, by the lake. Once they were seated beneath a beech tree on the shore of the Black Lake, safely out of earshot of any other students, Harry revealed what he'd sensed. Voldemort? Hermione gasped, her face paling. But that's impossible. He was destroyed when he attacked you as a baby. Not destroyed, Harry corrected. Damaged, disembodied, but not gone. And now he's possessing Quirrell, or at least attached to him somehow. Ron looked sick. We've been taking lessons from you-know-who. That's troubling, Harry finished. Especially since I don't think Dumbledore knows. He's powerful, but this kind of possession is almost undetectable unless you know exactly what to look for. We have to tell him, Hermione insisted. Harry nodded. We will. But first, I need to figure out what Voldemort is after. He wouldn't risk discovery unless the prize was worth it. What could be worth that? Ron asked. Immortality, Harry said grimly. Or power. Or both. A sudden thought struck him. The third-floor corridor, Dumbledore warned everyone to stay away from it at the feast. Said it was forbidden unless we wanted to die a most painful death. You think that's where whatever Voldemort wants is hidden? Hermione asked skeptically. Seems a bit obvious, announcing it to the whole school. Or brilliant, Harry countered. Hide it in plain sight, with just enough warning to keep most students away, but make it intriguing enough that Voldemort can't ignore it. So what do we do? Ron asked. We investigate, Harry decided. But carefully. Voldemort can't know I've recognized him. They spent the next few days gathering information. Hermione researched recent break-ins at Gringotts, discovering that a vault had been targeted the very day Hagrid had visited the bank on Dumbledore's orders. Ron, using his brother's knowledge of the castle, mapped potential entrances to the third-floor corridor. And Harry, drawing on Merlin's ancient connection to the foundations of Hogwarts, began searching for forgotten passageways that might lead to whatever Dumbledore was protecting. It was during one such exploration that Harry made a startling discovery. Deep beneath the castle, in a section that even the Marauder's map, which Fred and George Weasley had shown him, didn't document, he found a sealed chamber with familiar markings. The door was carved with symbols of the old religion, the magic that predated wands and Latin incantations, the raw power that Merlin himself had wielded. Harry traced the symbols with his fingers, feeling them respond to his touch. Onlookin', he whispered, the ancient word of opening flowing naturally from his lips. The door slid open silently, revealing a circular chamber much larger than the council room he'd shown Ron and Hermione. This was a true sanctum, Merlin's private workshop, untouched for centuries. Torches ignited as Harry entered, illuminating walls lined with shelves of ancient texts and artifacts. A large workbench dominated one side of the room, scattered with crystals, herbs, and instruments whose purpose had been long forgotten by modern wizardry. At the center stood a stone pedestal supporting a shallow basin filled with silvery liquid, not a pensieve, but something older and more powerful. The scrying pool, Harry murmured, memories surfacing as he approached it. He'd used this to watch over Arthur's kingdom, to glimpse threats before they materialized. Perhaps it still functioned. He removed Excalibur from around his neck, holding the pendant over the silvery surface. Ediwan me tic, he commanded. Show me what I seek. The liquid rippled, then stilled, revealing an image of a small, blood-red stone. As Harry watched, the image shifted to show Quirrell standing before a massive three-headed dog that guarded a trapdoor. Another shift, a series of chambers, each containing a different challenge or guardian. Final shift, Quirrell reaching for the stone, his turban unwrapped to reveal a hideous face protruding from the back of his head. Harry jerked back, breaking the connection. He knew what Voldemort sought now, the Philosopher's Stone, Nicholas Flamel's legendary creation that granted immortality and unlimited wealth. The perfect tool for a disembodied Dark Lord seeking restoration. He had to warn Dumbledore. But as he turned to leave, something else caught his eye, a large wooden chest tucked into an alcove, carved with the same symbols as the door. Whatever was inside had been important enough for Merlin to secure with the strongest protections of the old religion. Approaching cautiously, Harry examined the chest. Unlike the door, it had no obvious means of opening, no lock, no latch, not even a seam where a lid should be. Just solid wood carved with interlocking circles and ancient runes. Instinctively, Harry placed Excalibur against the center of the design. The pendant grew warm, then hot, the symbols on the chest glowing in response. With a soft click, the top of the chest dissolved into mist, revealing its contents. Inside lay 13 medallions arranged in a circle. Each was crafted from a different metal, gold, silver, bronze, iron, and others Harry couldn't immediately identify, and etched with unique symbols. At the center rested a larger medallion of pure white metal that seemed to glow with its own inner light. Harry recognized them instantly, the talismans of the Round Table, created by Merlin to amplify the natural abilities of Arthur and his knights. Each was attuned to a specific individual, enhancing their particular gifts while connecting them to one another. The circle can be restored, Harry whispered, reaching for the central medallion. As his fingers touched the white metal, visions flooded his mind, clearer than any he'd experienced since drawing Excalibur from the stone. He saw faces, modern faces, superimposed over the knights he'd once known: Ron Weasley, Sir Gawain, the loyal, steadfast warrior with unbreakable courage. Neville Longbottom, King Arthur himself, noble heart hidden beneath uncertainty. Hermione Granger, not a knight, but Lady Nimue, Merlin's most gifted apprentice. Fred and George Weasley, Sir Gareth and Sir Gaheris, the inseparable brothers whose coordination in battle was legendary. A Hufflepuff girl with pink hair, Sir Percival, the pure-hearted seeker of truth. A tall Ravenclaw boy, Sir Galahad, whose intellect matched his swordsmanship. Others flickered too quickly to identify, but the message was clear: the knights had returned, scattered throughout the houses of Hogwarts, awaiting awakening. And opposing them, the vision shifted, showing a shadowy round table, a dark mirror of Arthur's. At its head sat not Voldemort, but a different figure, a student with pale blonde hair and pointed features. Draco Malfoy, surrounded by his own circle of followers, wielding artifacts of ancient darkness. Harry gasped, breaking the connection. The medallion fell back into the chest, but the visions remained burned into his mind. This was bigger than Voldemort and the Philosopher's Stone. An ancient conflict was resurfacing, with battle lines drawn across house rivalries and schoolyard feuds. He needed to move quickly. Gathering the medallions into a velvet pouch he found in the workshop, Harry sealed the chamber behind him and made his way back to Gryffindor Tower. His mind raced with plans. He needed to approach each potential knight carefully. Some, like Ron and Hermione, were already receptive to the truth, while others might need more convincing. And what of Malfoy? The vision suggested he had his own connection to Arthurian legend, but on the opposing side. Was he aware of it yet? Was someone guiding him, as Dumbledore had guided Harry? Harry was so lost in thought that he nearly collided with Professor McGonagall at the entrance to Gryffindor Tower. "Mr. Potter," she said, her expression unusually grave. "I've been looking for you. The headmaster requires your presence in his office immediately." "Has something happened, Professor?" "It seems," McGonagall said carefully, "that the ministry delegation has arrived early. They're particularly interested in meeting you." Harry's heart sank. He'd been hoping for more time to gather his knights before confronting official scrutiny. "I see. And does the headmaster know why they're so interested?" McGonagall's lips thinned. "I believe he has his suspicions, as do I. Follow me, please." They walked in silence through the corridors, finally stopping before a stone gargoyle. "Lemon drop," McGonagall announced, and the gargoyle sprang aside, revealing a moving spiral staircase. At the top, they found Dumbledore seated behind his desk, facing 3 visitors. Harry recognized Lucius Malfoy, now accompanied by a squat, toad-like woman in a fluffy pink cardigan and a stern-looking wizard in the midnight blue robes of an unspeakable. "Ah, Harry," Dumbledore said pleasantly, though his eyes lacked their usual twinkle. "Thank you for joining us. May I introduce Dolores Umbridge, Senior Undersecretary to the Minister, and Augustus Rookwood, representing the Department of Mysteries." "A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Potter," Umbridge simpered in a girlish voice that set Harry's teeth on edge. "The Ministry has been so looking forward to learning more about your unique situation." "Indeed," Rookwood added, his eyes sharp with undisguised interest. "We understand you had an unusual experience at Gringotts some years ago. Something involving a sealed vault and an ancient artifact." Harry glanced at Dumbledore, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. They'd prepared for this eventuality, crafting a version of events that revealed enough to satisfy curiosity without exposing the full truth. "Yes, sir," Harry replied politely. "Professor Dumbledore took me to Gringotts when I was 6. There was a vault that reacted to my presence, and inside was a sword that I was able to draw from a stone pedestal. And this sword," Umbridge pressed, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes cold, "where is it now?" Harry touched the pendant beneath his shirt. "I keep it with me." "May we see it?" Rookwood asked, leaning forward eagerly. "I'm afraid that won't be possible," Dumbledore interjected smoothly. The sword has bonded with Harry in a way that makes it dangerous for others to handle. Several goblins suffered severe burns attempting to examine it after Harry's departure from the bank. This wasn't entirely true, but Harry maintained a neutral expression. Let them believe Excalibur was merely temperamental rather than sentient. Surely the boy could simply show us the sword, Malfoy drawled. Without anyone touching it. Harry met the man's gaze calmly. The sword appears when needed, Mr. Malfoy. It's not a parlor trick to be performed on command. Malfoy's eyes narrowed at the subtle rebuke. You seem remarkably composed for an 11-year-old speaking to adults, Potter. Harry has had an unusual upbringing, Dumbledore said mildly. May I ask the purpose of this interrogation? I was under the impression that your delegation wasn't due until next week, and that its purpose was to inspect educational standards, not to question individual students. Umbridge gave a high-pitched laugh that contained no humor. Oh, but educational standards include ensuring that students aren't exposed to dangerous artifacts, Headmaster. The Ministry has a responsibility to investigate anything that might pose a threat to our children. The sword poses no threat to anyone who doesn't intend harm, Harry said, finding it increasingly difficult to maintain the facade of an ordinary first year. Merlin's impatience with bureaucracy was surfacing. It's a tool of protection, not destruction. And how would you know that, Mr. Potter? Rookwood asked. What exactly happened when you touched this sword? Did you experience any unusual sensations? Dreams? Memories? The question was too precise to be coincidental. They knew something, or at least suspected. I felt a connection to it, Harry said carefully. Like it was meant for me. But nothing extraordinary beyond that. Rookwood looked disappointed, but Umbridge leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. The Department of Mysteries would very much like to examine you, Mr. Potter. Simple, painless tests to ensure that this artifact hasn't affected you negatively. Surely you want to know if you're in any danger. I assure you, Dolores, Dumbledore said, his voice hardening slightly, that I have personally monitored Harry's health and magical development since the Gringotts incident. He has undergone thorough examination by experts in magical artifacts. Ministry-approved experts, Dumbledore? Malfoy asked silkily. Experts I trust, Dumbledore replied, the implicit dismissal clear. Tension crackled in the office. Harry sensed the confrontation building toward a crisis point. If he refused outright, the Ministry might invoke emergency powers to force compliance. If he appeared too eager to cooperate, they might suspect he was hiding something more significant. Perhaps a compromise, he suggested, drawing all eyes to him. I could provide a demonstration of regular first-year skills under Ministry observation, to show that I'm developing normally. Would that satisfy your concerns about my educational progress? Umbridge looked thrown by this reasonable suggestion from a child, while Rookwood seemed to be reassessing Harry with new interest. That seems acceptable, Umbridge said finally. Though we would still prefer a more thorough examination. One step at a time, Harry said with a smile that he knew was disconcertingly mature. Shall we say tomorrow morning? I believe I have a free period after breakfast. After a moment of silent communication among the Ministry officials, Rookwood nodded. Tomorrow morning, then. The Great Hall should provide adequate space. Once the visitors had departed, Dumbledore sighed deeply, suddenly looking every one of his many years. They know more than they should, he said quietly. Or at least, they suspect. Someone has been researching Arthurian legends and making connections to your case. Rookwood, Harry said. He's an unspeakable, they study prophecies and ancient magic. And he was asking very specific questions about memories. Indeed. Which means we must be extremely careful about what you reveal tomorrow. A basic demonstration of age-appropriate magic, nothing more. Harry nodded, though privately he was forming a different plan. The Ministry's interest confirmed what the scrying pool had shown him, events were accelerating. He couldn't afford to wait. I should get back to my dormitory, he said. I'll need to prepare for tomorrow. Dumbledore studied him over his half-moon spectacles. There's something you're not telling me, Harry. Something you've discovered. Harry hesitated, then decided on a partial truth. I found one of Merlin's hidden chambers beneath the castle. It contained artifacts, items that could help awaken the others. Others? Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. You've identified them? Some. Ron and Hermione already suspect their connection. Neville is. Harry paused, uncertain how much to reveal even to Dumbledore. Important. Very important. Arthur, Dumbledore breathed, making the connection immediately. Of course. The parallel is striking once one looks beyond the surface insecurity. There are others scattered throughout the houses. And opposing forces as well. Harry touched the pouch containing the medallions. I need to gather them, prepare them. For what? For whatever comes next. Voldemort is just the beginning. Dumbledore's expression grew troubled. Be careful, Harry. Moving too quickly could alert those who would oppose you, both within the ministry and beyond it. Harry nodded, but as he descended the spiral staircase, his resolve hardened. The time for caution was past. The knights needed to be gathered, and soon. That night, Harry called a secret meeting in the hidden council chamber. Ron and Hermione arrived first, followed by Neville, who looked bewildered but came willingly when Harry said it was important. Then came Fred and George Weasley, their usual mischievous grins replaced by uncharacteristic seriousness after Harry had pulled them aside and whispered a phrase that had resonated with their buried memories, the brothers who fought as one. The Hufflepuff girl with pink hair, Tonks, a seventh-year metamorphmagus, arrived next, guided by an instinct she couldn't explain. Then the tall Ravenclaw boy Harry had seen in his vision, Roger Davies, who admitted he'd been dreaming of round tables and holy quests for weeks. One by one they came, 13 students from all 4 houses, drawn by invitations both spoken and subconscious, until they stood in a circle around the mosaic in the center of the chamber. You're probably wondering why I've gathered you here, Harry began, looking around at the confused but curious faces. The thought had crossed my mind, Tonks said, her hair shifting from pink to purple and back again. Not every day a first-year summons a seventh-year to a secret midnight meeting in a room that shouldn't exist. I'm here because Weasley asked me to come, Cedric Diggory, a fourth-year Hufflepuff, added with a nod toward Fred and George. Said it was a matter of destiny. And it is, Harry confirmed, stepping into the center of the circle. Each of you was invited because you share something in common, something you may have felt in dreams or fleeting moments of déjà vu. You've all lived before, in another time, and those past lives are connected to mine. Skeptical glances were exchanged, though Harry noted that none of them laughed outright or moved to leave. On some level, they recognized the truth in his words. You're talking about reincarnation, Roger Davies said thoughtfully. Past lives. Not just any past lives, Harry clarified, drawing Excalibur from beneath his shirt and holding the pendant up so all could see it. I'm talking about Camelot. King Arthur, Merlin, the Knights of the Round Table. Now there were a few nervous chuckles, quickly stifled as the pendant in Harry's hand began to glow, expanding and transforming into the legendary sword. Gasps echoed around the chamber as Excalibur shone with its own inner light, casting the students' faces in a golden glow. Bloody hell, breathed Lee Jordan, the Weasley twins' friend. Is that Excalibur? Harry confirmed. The sword I pulled from stone in a forgotten vault beneath Gringotts when I was 6 years old. The sword that awakened memories within me, memories of a life lived centuries ago, when I was known by another name. Merlin, Hermione whispered, and several students turned to look at her in shock. Harry nodded. I am Merlin reborn, returned in a time of gathering darkness. And you, he gestured around the circle, are the reincarnations of Arthur's greatest knights and allies, returned alongside me. The silence that followed was profound. Harry could see the struggle on their faces, skepticism warring with a bone-deep recognition they couldn't explain. "Prove it," challenged Angelina Johnson, a Gryffindor chaser. "Beyond the sword, which could be some elaborate enchantment. Prove we're these, reincarnated knights." Harry smiled. "I thought you might ask that." He reached into his robes and withdrew the velvet pouch containing the medallions. "These are the talismans of the Round Table, created to amplify each knight's natural gifts. They respond only to their true owners." He moved to Neville first, holding out a medallion of pure gold etched with a crown and sword. "Arthur, High King of Britain, whose courage and compassion united a divided land." Neville's eyes widened in disbelief. "Me? That's impossible. I can barely remember the password to our common room." "The greatest king I ever knew began as a boy who doubted himself," Harry said gently. "Take it, Neville. See if it accepts you." With trembling hands, Neville reached for the medallion. As his fingers closed around it, a soft golden light suffused his body. His posture straightened, his eyes cleared, and for a moment, everyone in the chamber saw the overlay of a crowned king where the round-faced boy had stood. "I remember," Neville whispered, wonder in his voice. "Not everything, but glimpses. A round table. A sword in stone. A brotherhood sworn to justice." One by one, Harry distributed the medallions, speaking each knight's name as he did: Ron Weasley, Sir Gawain, whose loyalty never wavered in the darkest hour. Fred and George Weasley, Sir Gareth and Sir Gaheris, who fought as one mind in two bodies. Hermione Granger, Lady Nimue, keeper of wisdom and guardian of sacred knowledge. Nymphadora Tonks, Sir Percival, whose pure heart saw truth where others saw only illusion. Roger Davies, Sir Galahad, who balanced intellect with martial prowess. Cedric Diggory, Sir Kay, the steadfast seneschal whose organizational mind kept Camelot running. Angelina Johnson, Sir Bors, who never backed down from a challenge, no matter the odds. Alicia Spinnet, Sir Lamorak, whose speed in battle was unmatched. Lee Jordan, Sir Dinadan, whose wit and words were as sharp as any sword. Susan Bones, Sir Tristan, who understood that true justice must be tempered with mercy. Luna Lovegood, Lady Elaine, who saw beyond the veil between worlds. Each medallion activated upon contact with its true owner, causing momentary transformations as ancient memories surfaced. Some gasped, some cried out, some simply stood in stunned silence as fragments of past lives flickered through their minds. When all had received their talismans, Harry returned to the center of the circle, raising Excalibur. "The Round Table is gathering once more," he declared. "Not in Camelot, but in Hogwarts. Not to serve a kingdom, but to protect a world that stands at the brink of darkness." "Voldemort," Ron said, surprising everyone by using the name without hesitation. His medallion glowed faintly against his chest, bolstering his confidence. "He is one threat," Harry agreed. "Currently hidden within this very castle, possessing our defense professor as he hunts for an artifact of great power. But he is not the only danger we face." Harry explained what he'd seen in the scrying pool, Voldemort's quest for the Philosopher's Stone, the protective measures Dumbledore had established, and the darker vision of Malfoy at the head of an opposing table. "Mordred," Neville said suddenly, his voice deeper than usual, more assured. "Draco is Mordred reborn." Murmurs spread around the circle as others nodded in recognition of this truth. "That would explain his fixation on you, Harry," Hermione observed. "The ancient enmity carrying through." "What about Snape?" asked George, or perhaps Fred. Even with their medallions active, they remained difficult to tell apart. "He's got it in for you something fierce." Harry frowned. "Snape is complicated. I sense a connection to the old magic in him, but it's twisted, conflicted. I'm not yet sure where he fits." "So what do we do?" Cedric asked, practical as ever. "We can hardly announce to the school that we're reincarnated Arthurian figures forming a new round table." "We don't need to," Harry replied. We work in secret for now, training, preparing. Tomorrow, the ministry will attempt to evaluate me in the Great Hall. It's an opportunity to send a message, not just to them, but to any who might be watching. What kind of message? Angelina asked. Harry smiled, a hint of Merlin's ancient confidence showing through. That Hogwarts is protected. That forces are awakening that they would be wise not to challenge. And most importantly, that they're already too late to stop what has been set in motion. They spent the next hour planning. Each night, and Harry found himself thinking of them that way now, despite their youth, shared what they remembered of their skills from their past lives. Some recalled combat techniques, others diplomatic strategies or scholarly knowledge. All felt the connection growing stronger, the medallions linking them in a web of shared purpose. By the time they dispersed to return to their dormitories, a transformation had taken place. They moved with new confidence, stood with straighter backs, spoke with clearer purpose. The awakening had begun. Neville, Harry called as the others filed out. Stay a moment. When they were alone, Harry turned to the boy who had been Arthur. How much do you remember? Neville touched the golden medallion at his throat. Pieces. Fragments. Enough to know that I was important. A leader. He looked up, uncertainty warring with newfound strength in his eyes. But Harry, I'm not him. Not really. I can't even stand up to Malfoy in potions, let alone lead knights into battle. Arthur wasn't born a king, Harry reminded him gently. He became one through his choices, his growth. The medallion doesn't change who you are, Neville, it reminds you of who you can be. But why me? Why not someone like Cedric or Roger? They're already leaders. Because the greatest kings are those who never sought the throne, Harry said, echoing words he'd once spoken to a young Arthur centuries ago. Those who rule not from ambition, but from duty and compassion. Neville looked down at his hands, which had stopped trembling. I don't know if I can be what everyone needs me to be. You won't be alone, Harry promised. That's the point of the round table. No one person bears the burden alone. As Neville nodded and turned to leave, Harry added, oh, and Neville. Perhaps it's time you tried using your father's wand rather than your grandmother's. The wrong wand can suppress even the greatest magical potential. Neville looked startled, then thoughtful. How did you know I was using my father's wand? Harry smiled enigmatically. Merlin knows many things. The next morning, an expectant hush fell over the great hall as students filed in for breakfast to find the ministry delegation seated at a special table erected perpendicular to the staff table. Rumors had spread overnight about a special demonstration, though few knew the details. Harry entered with Ron and Hermione, all three wearing their medallions concealed beneath their robes. The other knights were similarly adorned, scattered throughout the hall at their house tables but united by the invisible bond of their shared purpose. Dumbledore rose from his seat at the center of the staff table. Good morning, students. As you may have noticed, we are hosting visitors from the Ministry of Magic today. He gestured toward Umbridge, Rookwood, and Malfoy. As part of their educational assessment, they have requested a demonstration of first-year magical proficiency. Mr. Potter has kindly volunteered to provide such a demonstration after breakfast. Excited whispers broke out across the hall. Harry Potter, already the subject of endless speculation, was going to perform for ministry officials. Even Malfoy, seated at the Slytherin table, looked intrigued beneath his customary sneer. Breakfast passed in a blur of anticipation. Harry ate calmly, ignoring the stares and whispers, occasionally exchanging glances with his knights. When the meal concluded, Dumbledore waved his wand, clearing the center of the hall and conjuring a simple dueling platform. Mr. Potter, if you would, Umbridge called, her girlish voice carrying across the suddenly silent hall. Harry stood, moving with deliberate grace toward the platform. He could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him, but it was nothing compared to the awareness of being watched by something older and darker, Voldemort's consciousness, hidden behind Quirrell's nervous exterior at the staff table. The Ministry wishes to assess your magical development, Rookwood explained as Harry mounted the platform. Simple demonstrations of standard first-year spells will suffice. Professor Flitwick has agreed to oversee the evaluation. The tiny charms professor nodded encouragingly as he joined Harry on the platform. We'll begin with something straightforward. The levitation charm, perhaps? Harry nodded, drawing his wand. He could feel his knights tensing around the hall, aware that what came next would be more than a simple demonstration. Wingardium Leviosa, he incanted clearly, directing his wand at a feather Flitwick provided. The feather rose smoothly into the air, hovering at eye level, a perfectly executed charm that any competent first year might perform. Umbridge looked almost disappointed at the ordinariness of it. Very good, Flitwick squeaked. Now perhaps a simple transfiguration. Professor McGonagall has provided a matchstick. Harry performed each requested spell with precise, textbook execution, neither too powerful nor too hesitant, exactly what one would expect from a talented but not extraordinary first year. He could see Rookwood growing increasingly frustrated as the demonstration continued without revealing anything unusual. Perhaps something more challenging. Umbridge suggested, her sweet tone belied by the calculating look in her eyes. To truly assess Mr. Potter's capabilities. I believe we agreed to standard first-year spells, Dumbledore interjected mildly from the staff table. Just one more demonstration, Rookwood pressed. Something to show the students what they might aspire to. He turned to Harry. Perhaps you could show us the most advanced spell you know, Mr. Potter. To inspire your classmates. It was a transparent attempt to provoke him into revealing his true abilities, but it also provided the opening Harry had been waiting for. He glanced around the hall, making brief eye contact with each of his knights, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Very well, Harry said, slipping his wand back into his robes. Though I should warn you, it's rather unconventional. Before anyone could question him, Harry closed his eyes and raised his empty hands. Around the hall, his knights touched their medallions through their robes, channeling their energy toward him. A ripple of power surged through the ancient connection of the round table, flowing into Harry and manifesting as a shimmering golden aura that enveloped his body. Gasps echoed throughout the great hall as Harry opened his eyes, which now glowed with the same golden light. When he spoke, his voice carried an undercurrent of ancient power that resonated through the stone walls of the castle itself. Hogwarts was founded as a sanctuary for magical learning, he said, the words directed at the Ministry officials but reaching every ear in the hall. A place where knowledge could be preserved and passed to new generations. But it was also created as a fortress against darkness, with protections woven into its very foundations by those who understood the true nature of magic. As he spoke, the enchanted ceiling above began to shift, the illusion of the morning sky giving way to a map of stars not seen for centuries, constellations as they had appeared during the age of Camelot. Those protections recognized threats, Harry continued, the golden light spreading from his body to trace the outline of a round table on the floor around him. They distinguish between those who come as friends and those who come with darker purpose. Rookwood half rose from his seat, his expression a mixture of awe and alarm. What is this magic? This isn't first-year spell work. No, Harry agreed calmly. It's much older. The magic that built this castle, that established the boundaries between the magical and mundane worlds, that set the very foundations of what we now call wizardry. The golden light continued to expand, touching each of the knights in turn, briefly illuminating them so that for a heartbeat, their past selves were visible as ghostly overlays, armored figures from an age of legend, standing in place of students. Umbridge's face had lost all color. Stop this at once. This is completely unauthorized, her words cut off as the light reached the staff table, flowing around the professors but halting abruptly at Quirrell. The defense professor began to tremble violently, his turban smoking slightly where the golden energy touched it. Curious, Harry said, focusing his attention on Quirrell. The light rejects you, Professor. I wonder why that might be. Quirrell jerked to his feet, knocking over his chair as he backed away from the advancing light. Stop. He stammered, but there was a harder edge beneath the stutter now, a second voice trying to assert control. This is dangerous foolishness. Harry allowed the light to recede, though the constellation map remained overhead and the outline of the round table still glowed faintly on the floor. He turned back to the ministry officials, who were now standing, wands drawn. "I believe that concludes my demonstration," he said, his voice returning to normal as the golden glow faded from his eyes. "I hope it was instructive." The great hall erupted into chaos, students talking excitedly, professors trying to restore order, ministry officials demanding explanations. Through it all, Harry descended calmly from the platform, rejoining Ron and Hermione at the Gryffindor table. "Blimey, Harry," Ron whispered, eyes wide. "That was... I felt it. We all did. The connection, the power. It was brilliant." "And extremely reckless," Hermione added, though she couldn't quite hide her impressed expression. "You've just announced our presence to everyone, including Voldemort." "They needed to know," Harry said simply. "All of them. The Ministry, Voldemort, whoever is guiding Malfoy, they needed to understand that the old powers are awakening, that the balance is shifting." Across the hall, Draco Malfoy was staring at Harry with an expression of mingled fury and fascination. For a brief moment during the demonstration, Harry had seen something flicker across the Slytherin's features, recognition, perhaps, of his own connection to ancient forces. "Mordred knows," Harry murmured. "Or he's beginning to. Potter." McGonagall's voice cut through the commotion as she approached, her expression stern but her eyes betraying concern. "The headmaster requires your presence in his office. Immediately." Harry nodded, having expected this. "Of course, Professor." As he stood to follow her, he felt a hand on his arm. Neville, looking both terrified and exhilarated, had moved to sit beside them. Were we really, he struggled to articulate the question. Harry smiled. "Yes, Neville. For a moment, we were who we once were. And will be again." He glanced around at the other knights, each watching from their respective tables. "Practice with your medallions tonight. The connection will strengthen with use." McGonagall cleared her throat impatiently, and Harry followed her from the hall, aware of the many eyes tracking his departure, some wary, some wondering, some openly hostile. The demonstration had achieved exactly what he'd intended. Everyone now knew that something extraordinary was happening at Hogwarts, even if they didn't understand exactly what. The confrontation with Dumbledore was predictably intense. The headmaster, while not angry, was deeply concerned about the public display of power that could not be explained away as ordinary magic. "You've forced the Ministry's hand," Dumbledore said gravely, pacing his office while various silver instruments whirred more rapidly than usual. "They cannot ignore such a demonstration. Fudge will demand answers." "Let him," Harry replied, seated calmly before the desk. "The time for hiding is past. Voldemort is already here, hunting the stone. Malfoy is gathering his own circle. The battle lines are being drawn whether we acknowledge them or not." "And you believe exposing yourself, and your knights," was the prudent response. "I believe concealment was becoming more dangerous than revelation," Harry countered. The Ministry was already suspicious. Better they face the reality on our terms than discover it on theirs. Dumbledore sighed, settling into his chair. "You may be right. But the consequences will be significant. Umbridge is already drafting educational decrees to increase Ministry oversight at Hogwarts. Rookwood has requested unspeakable reinforcements to study what he terms the Arthurian manifestation. And Lucius Malfoy." He paused, his expression darkening. "Lucius is meeting with certain governors about my fitness to continue as headmaster." "They can't remove you," Harry said confidently. "The castle won't allow it. Not now that it's awakened to its original purpose. Perhaps. But they can make things very difficult for your knights. Many of whom have families vulnerable to Ministry pressure." This gave Harry pause. He hadn't fully considered how the families of his knights might be affected. The Weasleys, already viewed with suspicion by pure-blood extremists. Neville's grandmother, formidable but elderly. Hermione's Muggle parents, entirely unprotected against magical threats. Then we protect them, he decided. The talismans aren't just for connecting us, they're for defense as well. I'll accelerate the training, teach them how to extend their protections to their families. And in the meantime? Dumbledore asked. What of Quirrell and the stone? We monitor him. Now that he knows we're watching, he'll be more cautious. And we prepare for when he makes his move. Harry stood, feeling the weight of Excalibur against his chest. The Round Table is forming, Albus. Not just as a historical echo, but as a new force for the coming conflict. I prefer to have you with us rather than trying to restrain us. Dumbledore studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Very well, Harry. Or perhaps I should say, Merlin. I will support your Round Table, though I maintain my reservations about the pace of events. Fair enough, Harry conceded with a smile. After all, even Merlin occasionally moved too quickly for his own good. The fallout from the Great Hall demonstration was swift and far-reaching. By dinner that evening, the Daily Prophet had published a special edition with the headline, Arthurian Magic at Hogwarts. Boy Who Lived displays unprecedented abilities. The article, penned by a reporter named Rita Skeeter, was a mixture of breathless speculation and carefully phrased insinuations about Harry's mental stability and Dumbledore's judgment. It quoted ministry sources expressing concern about unauthorized magical experimentation and potentially dangerous ancient practices being permitted at a school. More worrying were the sidebars describing increased security measures at the Department of Mysteries and the formation of a special committee to investigate Arthurian resurgence phenomena. Harry had expected scrutiny, but the speed and scale of the response suggested someone in power had been preparing for this possibility. They'd been watching for signs, Hermione concluded as they huddled in the council chamber that evening, all 13 knights present. The Ministry, or at least parts of it, has been monitoring for Arthurian magic reappearing. Which means they know more than they're saying, Roger Davies added thoughtfully. Perhaps they have prophecies or artifacts of their own. Harry nodded. The Department of Mysteries has been studying prophecies for centuries. They may well have records predicting Merlin's return. So what now? Tonks asked, her hair cycling through colors with her agitation. I've got Auror training interviews next year. Will they reject me because I'm part of your Round Table? They'd be fools to, Harry replied. But we need to be prepared for opposition from multiple fronts now. The Ministry, Voldemort, and whatever faction is guiding Malfoy. Speaking of Malfoy, Fred, or possibly George, interjected, he's been gathering his own little group in the Slytherin common room. Our friend Pusey overheard them talking about ancient birthright and balancing the scales. Mordred is awakening too, Harry said grimly. Likely with assistance, just as I had Dumbledore. The question is, who's guiding him? Could it be his father? Ron suggested. Lucius Malfoy seems like the type to be involved in ancient dark magic. Harry shook his head. Lucius is ambitious and prejudiced, but he's not connected to Arthurian magic. No, there's someone else, someone who recognizes the signs and is positioning Draco as a counterweight. Regardless of who's behind it, Cedric said practically, we need to prepare. These medallions give us a connection, but most of us barely remember our past skills. We need training. Harry agreed, and over the next hour, they established a training regimen. Each knight would work on remembering and developing their unique abilities while maintaining the appearance of normal students. They would use the council chamber for group practice 3 times weekly, and in the meantime, watch for any unusual activity from Quirrell, Malfoy, or the Ministry representatives who remained at the castle. As the meeting concluded, Harry held back Hermione. There's something specific I need your help with, he said once the others had departed. The Philosopher's Stone. You think Voldemort is still after it, even after your demonstration? She asked. I know he is. If anything, he's more desperate now. He needs a body of his own to counter the power we displayed. Harry paced the chamber, Excalibur glowing faintly beneath his robes. The stone is protected by a series of challenges created by the professors, but they won't be enough to stop a determined Voldemort, even in his weakened state. So what do you suggest? We need to add another layer of protection, something drawing on the old religion, magic Voldemort wouldn't understand or expect. Harry stopped before the mosaic in the center of the floor. There's an enchantment Merlin once used to protect the Grail. With your help, I think I can adapt it for the stone. Hermione looked surprised. My help? But I barely remember anything about being who you say I was. Nimue was Merlin's most gifted apprentice, Harry explained. She had a particular talent for protective enchantments. That talent is still within you, Hermione, whether you consciously remember it or not. She touched her medallion uncertainly. How would it work? We'd need to access the stone's current location without alerting Quirrell or the other professors. Then create a magical barrier tied to intent. Only someone seeking to protect or preserve life could retrieve it, not someone seeking immortality for themselves. Hermione's eyes widened. That's incredibly complex magic, Harry. Far beyond anything taught at Hogwarts. It's not beyond us, he said confidently. Not when we work together. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. All right. When do we start? Tonight. The castle will help us reach the stone undetected. True to Harry's word, the castle seemed to rearrange itself to facilitate their journey to the third-floor corridor. Doorways appeared where solid walls had been, staircases shifted to create direct paths, and a few prefects on patrol mysteriously found themselves drawn to different areas entirely. They reached the forbidden corridor without incident, stopping before a heavy wooden door. Alohomora, Hermione whispered, and the lock clicked open. Inside, they found exactly what Harry had seen in the scrying pool, an enormous three-headed dog sleeping fitfully in a room barely large enough to contain it. A harp lay silent in the corner, suggesting someone, Quirrell, most likely, had already been testing the defenses. Fluffy, Harry murmured, recognizing Hagrid's pet from his groundskeeper friend's descriptions. He's guarding the trapdoor. How do we get past without waking him? Hermione asked nervously. Instead of answering, Harry approached the massive creature, hand extended. Old friend, he whispered in the language of the old religion, we seek passage not to take, but to protect. Grant us safe journey. To Hermione's astonishment, all three heads opened their eyes but remained calm, regarding Harry with what almost looked like recognition. The middle head nudged the trapdoor with its nose, clearly granting permission. Cerberus guardians have long memories, Harry explained quietly as they slipped past. They remember the old magic and those who wielded it respectfully. The trapdoor opened onto darkness. Harry conjured a floating light as they descended, landing not on hard ground but on a mass of soft, writhing vegetation. Devil's Snare, Hermione identified immediately, just as the plant began to curl around their legs. It likes the dark and damp, Incendio, Harry said calmly, and a controlled ring of blue flames spread around them, causing the plant to retreat without burning it. Professor Sprout's contribution, I believe. They proceeded through the subsequent challenges, flying keys enchanted by Flitwick, a giant chess set from McGonagall, a troll already unconscious, Quirrell's addition, conveniently neutralized by its master, and Snape's logic puzzle of potions. Harry solved each efficiently, neither rushing nor hesitating, while Hermione watched with growing amazement. You've done this before, she realized as they passed through the purple flames into the final chamber. Not just seen it in visions, you've physically been through these challenges. Harry nodded. I needed to understand what we were dealing with. And yes, Merlin's abilities allow me to move through Hogwarts undetected when necessary. The final chamber was circular, with pillars of flame surrounding a central platform. Atop it stood an ornate mirror that Harry recognized immediately from Dumbledore's descriptions during their private conversations. The Mirror of Eriste, he said. Dumbledore's final protection. It shows the viewer their heart's deepest desire, but he's modified it somehow. Hermione approached cautiously. How does it protect the stone? I believe only someone who wants to find the stone but not use it would be able to retrieve it from the mirror. Harry joined her before the reflective surface. Look. In the mirror, they saw themselves as they were, but behind their reflections stood shadowy figures in medieval garb, a bearded man in robes with a staff and a young woman with flowing dark hair wearing a circlet of silver. The reflection smiled, and the Harry in the mirror reached into his pocket, withdrawing a blood-red stone that he then returned to his pocket. At the same moment, Harry felt a real weight drop into his actual pocket. He withdrew the Philosopher's Stone, a ruby-red crystal about the size of his palm, pulsing with inner light. That's it? Hermione whispered. Dumbledore's enchantment just gave it to you. Because I don't want to use it, Harry explained. I only want to protect it. He held the stone out between them. Now comes our part. For the next hour, they worked together to weave an additional layer of protection around the stone. Harry guided Hermione through the ancient words and gestures, amazed at how quickly she grasped concepts that had taken other apprentices months to master. Her medallion glowed throughout the process, channeling knowledge from her past life to aid her present work. The completed enchantment surrounded the stone with a subtle golden sheen visible only to those who knew to look for it. Now, even if someone managed to obtain the stone, they would find it impossible to use for selfish purposes. It would simply turn to ordinary rock in their hands. We should return it to the mirror, Hermione suggested as they finished. So Quirrell doesn't realize it's been tampered with. Harry agreed, and with a thought, the stone transferred from his hand back into the mirror's protection. Their additional enchantment would remain, invisible but potent. As they made their way back through the challenges, Hermione grew thoughtful. Harry, if you're Merlin reborn, and I was Nimue, doesn't that mean we were? She trailed off, a blush coloring her cheeks. Complicated, Harry supplied with a small smile. In some versions of the legend, Merlin and Nimue were adversaries. In others, teacher and student. In still others. He paused, suddenly aware of the awkwardness. They were 11 and 12 years old, after all, discussing past lives where they'd been adults with a complex relationship. In any case, we're different people now. Our past lives inform us but don't define us. Hermione nodded, looking relieved. That makes sense. It's just strange, having these fragments of memory, these feelings that don't quite fit. The integration becomes easier with time, Harry assured her. The medallions help, creating a bridge between who we were and who we are. They reached the devil's snare again, ascending through the trapdoor to find Fluffy still peacefully allowing their passage. As they slipped back into the corridor, however, a voice from the shadows froze them in place. Well, well. What have we here? Severus Snape stepped into the torchlight, his black eyes gleaming with suspicion. Out for a midnight stroll, Potter? And dragging Miss Granger into your rule-breaking as well. How predictably arrogant. Harry straightened, meeting Snape's gaze evenly. Professor. We were ensuring additional protection for the stone. Snape's eyes narrowed. And what would you know about the stone? Everything, Harry replied simply. Including the fact that Professor Quirrell is currently possessed by Voldemort and intends to steal it. For once, Snape seemed genuinely taken aback, though he recovered quickly. Preposterous. And even if true, what business is it of yours to interfere with protections set by your professors? Because those protections won't be enough, Harry said. Not against Voldemort, even in his weakened state. We've added an enchantment he won't expect or understand. We. Snape's gaze shifted to Hermione, who stood nervously but determinedly at Harry's side. Ancient magic, Harry explained. Beyond even what Dumbledore employed. Magic from before the founding of Hogwarts. Something flickered in Snape's expression, recognition, perhaps, or memory. Arthurian magic. Like your demonstration in the Great Hall. Harry nodded. Professor, I know you don't like me. You see my father when you look at me, and those memories bring pain. But right now, there's more at stake than old grudges. Voldemort is here, within these walls, and the stone is just the beginning of what he seeks. Snape stared at him for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then, to both Harry's and Hermione's surprise, he stepped aside. Return to your dormitory. I will, consider what you've said about Quirrell. As they hurried away, Hermione whispered, did that really just happen? Snape letting us go? He knows more than he lets on, Harry replied thoughtfully. There's something about him, a connection to the old magic that I still can't place. But for now, he's chosen not to stand in our way. That's enough. The next few weeks saw dramatic changes at Hogwarts. The Ministry's presence expanded, with Umbridge establishing an office from which she observed classes and interviewed students. Rookwood could often be found measuring magical emanations around the castle with strange silver instruments, paying particular attention to areas where Harry and his knights gathered. The knights themselves continued their training in secret, each making remarkable progress as their medallions awakened more of their past abilities. Ron's strategic mind sharpened to the point where he could predict an opponent's moves 7 steps ahead. Neville's confidence grew steadily, his magical power increasing as he practiced with a new wand purchased by Owl Order. Even Luna, the most ethereal of the group, demonstrated an uncanny ability to sense magical disturbances before they occurred. Harry divided his time between training his knights, monitoring Quirrell, researching Malfoy's activities, and maintaining the appearance of a normal student. It was exhausting but necessary work, especially as tensions in the wider wizarding world escalated. The Daily Prophet reported increased activity from former Death Eaters, though the Ministry officially denied any connection to Voldemort. Gringotts implemented new security measures after detecting unusual magical signatures in several high-security vaults. And international magical authorities began expressing concern about the Arthurian resurgence in Britain, with some suggesting intervention might be necessary if the situation destabilized further. Through it all, Harry sensed the approaching crisis. Voldemort would make his move for the stone soon, driven by desperation as his host body deteriorated. Malfoy's circle was growing, with students from all houses, not just Slytherin, drawn to his promises of power and prestige. And the Ministry, rather than recognizing the true threats, seemed determined to control or suppress the Round Table. It all came to a head one evening in late May. Harry was in the library with Ron and Hermione, researching ancient protection charms, when Luna burst in, her normally dreamy expression replaced by urgent focus. It's happening, she said without preamble. Tonight. Both of them are moving. Harry didn't need clarification. Where? Quirrell's headed for the 3rd floor. Malfoy and his group are gathering in the dungeons with something they've smuggled in, something old and dark. Alert the others, Harry instructed. Full assembly in the council chamber in 20 minutes. As Luna hurried away, Harry turned to Ron and Hermione. We need to split our forces. The stone must be protected, but we can't ignore whatever Malfoy's planning. I'll take a team to the dungeons, Ron offered, his medallion glowing with anticipation. Malfoy's mine. No, Harry said firmly. I need you with me against Quirrell. If Voldemort is truly making his move, it will take our combined strength to stop him. Ron looked like he wanted to argue but nodded reluctantly. Who leads the second team, then? Neville, Harry decided. It's time for Arthur to face Mordred. When all 13 knights had gathered in the council chamber, Harry explained the situation and divided their forces. Ron, Hermione, and the Weasley twins would accompany him to intercept Quirrell. Neville would lead Cedric, Angelina, Roger, and Luna to confront Malfoy. The remaining knights would position themselves throughout the castle as a second line of defense, ready to respond where needed. This isn't just about the stone or whatever artifact Malfoy has acquired, Harry told them. This is the first true test of the Round Table reborn. Our actions tonight will set the pattern for what follows. He looked around the circle, meeting each pair of eyes. Remember who you were. Remember who you are. And above all, remember why we fight, not for glory or power, but to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Neville stepped forward, his transformation over the past weeks evident in his straight posture and clear gaze. For the Round Table, he said, raising his medallion. The others joined him, medallions glowing in unison. For the Round Table. As they moved to their positions, Harry pulled Neville aside. Are you ready for this? Malfoy may not yet have Mordred's full power, but he's dangerous nonetheless. Neville smiled, a hint of ancient kingship in his expression. You know, it's strange. A month ago, I couldn't even face him in potions without trembling. Now. He touched his golden medallion. Now I remember what it means to lead, to stand against darkness no matter the cost. Arthur's courage was never in question, Harry said, clasping Neville's shoulder. Only his belief in himself. I believe now, Neville replied simply. We all do. As Harry's team made their way to the third-floor corridor, they encountered Severus Snape hurrying in the same direction, his black robes billowing behind him. Potter, he hissed, eyes widening at the sight of their determined procession. What do you think you're doing? The same as you, Professor, Harry replied calmly. Quirrell is making his move tonight. Snape hesitated, then nodded curtly. Dumbledore is away, called to the Ministry on urgent business. Too convenient to be coincidence. Will you stand with us? Harry asked. Something complicated passed across Snape's features. I serve Dumbledore, not your Round Table. But in this, our purposes align. He drew his wand. Quirrell must not obtain the stone. When they reached the forbidden door, they found it already ajar. Fluffy was awake but magically restrained, all three heads muzzled by glowing bands of energy. The trapdoor stood open, a faint light emanating from below. He's already inside, Ron said unnecessarily, his hand going to his medallion. Harry nodded. Then we follow. Professor, you're familiar with these defenses? I designed one of them, Snape confirmed. Good. You and the twins take the rear. Ron, Hermione, and I will lead. Harry drew Excalibur, the sword expanding to its full size in his hand. Be ready for anything. This isn't just Quirrell we're facing, it's Voldemort. Snape flinched at the name but didn't protest. Together, they descended through the trapdoor, moving swiftly through the challenges that Harry and Hermione had navigated before. Each had been disrupted but not destroyed, the devil's snare charred in places, the flying keys scattered, the chess pieces reduced to rubble. He's not being subtle, Fred, or George, observed. Blasting through rather than solving them. He's in a hurry, Harry agreed. His host body is failing. He needs the stone now. When they reached the chamber with the Mirror of Erist, they found Quirrell standing before it, his turban removed to reveal the horrific sight of Voldemort's face protruding from the back of his head. The malformed visage was contorted with fury as Quirrell pounded on the mirror's surface. It's in there, the high, cold voice of Voldemort hissed. I can see it, but I cannot reach it. Use the boy, use Potter. Looking for something, Riddle? Harry called, stepping into the chamber with Excalibur raised. Both Quirrell and Voldemort turned, the latter's red eyes widening at the sight of the legendary sword. Potter, Voldemort breathed. So the rumors are true. The boy who lived carries Merlin's soul. And Merlin's blade, Harry confirmed, the sword gleaming with its own inner light. Step away from the mirror. You won't be claiming the stone tonight. Voldemort's lipless mouth twisted into a grotesque smile. Such confidence for one so young. Or is it the old man within you speaking? Either way, you are too late. I have spent weeks preparing for this confrontation. With a sudden gesture from Quirrell's wand, the flames surrounding the chamber roared higher, forming a barrier that separated Harry from his companions. Only Hermione, who had been at his side, remained with him inside the circle of fire. "Harry!" Ron shouted, trying to push through the flames but recoiling from their heat. "We're all right," Harry called back. "Find another way through." Voldemort laughed, the sound chilling despite coming from Quirrell's throat. "There is no other way. Just you, the girl, and me." How fitting that Merlin should have his Nimue at his side for his final defeat. Harry felt Hermione tense beside him, her medallion glowing in response to Voldemort's words. "You know the legends," he said, keeping Excalibur steady. "Then you should also know how they end, with Arthur's return and the triumph of light over darkness." "Legends can be rewritten," Voldemort hissed. "As I shall demonstrate." He raised Quirrell's wand. Crucio. Harry pushed Hermione aside and raised Excalibur to meet the curse. The red beam struck the ancient blade and shattered, fragments of magic dissipating harmlessly into the air. "Impossible," Voldemort breathed. "No shield can block an unforgivable." "Excalibur is no ordinary shield," Harry replied, advancing steadily. "And I am no ordinary opponent." Voldemort's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps not. But neither am I." He began to chant in a language older than Latin, older even than the Celtic tongues Merlin had known. It was a language of shadows, of magic corrupted and twisted from its original purpose. The chamber darkened as tendrils of black energy erupted from the floor, writhing like serpents toward Harry and Hermione. Harry recognized the spell, a perversion of earth magic designed to drain life force. "Hermione, your medallion," he shouted, raising his own. "Channel your protection through it." Hermione clutched her silver medallion, closing her eyes in concentration. As she did, a shimmering dome of light expanded around them, pushing back the shadow tendrils wherever they touched. "Impossible," Voldemort hissed again, but now there was uncertainty in his voice. "The girl cannot possibly wield such power." "You understand nothing of true power," Harry replied, continuing his advance through the writhing shadows. "You see magic as a tool for domination, but it was never meant for that. It's a force of balance, of harmony with the natural world." "Pretty words from a dead man walking," Voldemort snarled, abandoning the shadow spell for a barrage of more conventional curses. Avada Kedavra. The killing curse streaked toward Harry, who met it once more with Excalibur's blade. But this time, instead of dissipating, the green energy was absorbed into the sword, causing it to vibrate violently in Harry's hand. "The old religion teaches that to destroy death, one must understand it," Harry said, his voice deepening as more of Merlin's consciousness surfaced. "To understand it, one must accept it as part of the natural cycle. Something you, with your Horcruxes and quest for immortality, have never grasped." With a flick of his wrist, Harry redirected the absorbed energy of the killing curse back toward Voldemort, not as the same spell but transformed into a beam of golden light. It struck Quirrell's chest, causing the professor to scream in agony as his body began to disintegrate. "What have you done?" Voldemort shrieked as his host literally crumbled beneath him. "What is this magic?" "Life and death in balance," Harry answered calmly. "Your host was already dying from your possession. I merely accelerated the natural process." As Quirrell's body collapsed into dust, a wraith-like form rose from the remains, Voldemort's spectral essence, red eyes burning with hatred as it hovered momentarily before them. "This isn't over, Potter." "Merlin, whatever you call yourself," the spirit hissed. "I have other anchors, other paths to return. And when I do, I will show you what true power means." Harry raised Excalibur, its tip pointing directly at the wraith. "You won't find it easy to secure another host, Tom. Not with the protections we'll be placing across Britain. Ancient wards are being reactivated, ley lines purified. Your Horcruxes will be found and cleansed." Voldemort's spectral form wavered, genuine alarm crossing its inhuman features before it fled, streaming through the chamber wall like smoke. As soon as Voldemort's presence vanished, the magical flames surrounding them died down, allowing Ron and the others to rush forward. "Bloody hell," Ron breathed, staring at the pile of dust that had been Quirrell. "You actually did it." "Only temporarily," Harry cautioned, reverting Excalibur to its pendant form. "We've bought time, nothing more. Voldemort will find another way to return, we need to be ready when he does." Snape approached cautiously, his face even paler than usual as he surveyed the scene. "The stone?" "Safe," Harry assured him. "Protected by enchantments Voldemort couldn't break." A silvery light interrupted them as Cedric's Patronus, a magnificent eagle, soared into the chamber, speaking with his voice, situation contained in the dungeons. Malfoy and his group apprehended with an artifact. Neville was brilliant. "Meet us in the Great Hall." Harry smiled, pride warming his chest. "It seems Arthur has faced his Mordred and prevailed." "For now," Hermione added pragmatically. "But this is just the beginning, isn't it?" Harry nodded, his expression turning serious once more. "The first battle of a much larger war. Voldemort, Mordred, the Ministry, all pieces in a game that's been unfolding for centuries." He touched his medallion, feeling the connection to his knights pulsing strong and true. "But this time, we're ready. The Round Table has returned." As they made their way to the Great Hall to join the others, Harry felt Hogwarts itself responding to the night's events. The castle's ancient magic, dormant for so long, was fully awakening, recognizing its creators and defenders. Torches burned brighter, corridors shifted to ease their passage, and somewhere deep in the foundations, the original enchantments laid by Merlin himself began to stir. The knights had gathered. The sword had returned. And across Britain, other ancient powers were taking notice, preparing for what was to come. The game had truly begun. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.